Welcome to Terror in Tandem, a podcast about finding entertainment in the macabre, hosted by the knowledgeable and lovable Laura and Richard Mathiasen. Each episode we discuss the horror genre, from books to film to TV and beyond, sometimes even from the beyond. You can find us on YouTube at Terror in Tandem, on Instagram at Terror in Tandem, and you'll always find our latest episode on our website, terrorintandem.com.
That reminds me.
You need to upload some new videos to YouTube.
The infernal imps that I summoned and enslaved to do that have fallen behind.
Oh, yeah?
I might have forgotten to feed them. But that's the thing about infernal imps. You just summon some more.
Yeah, I mean, you better be careful who you're calling an imp, though.
Yeah.
Just in case.
They're not imps. Well,
No,
I mean...
in case they want to seek revenge.
True.
Yeah.
I have made enemies.
We do have 123 subscribers on YouTube.
Hello, YouTube. Sorry for neglecting you.
I do want to say that one of our videos, Worst Parents in Horror, this should tell the audience a lot, has 756 views.
Oh, is that a shared experience for members of maybe our age demographic? Well, it's both nice and depressing to know.
Yeah.
But speaking of horror movies, I've been on a bit of a tear. Really just... So you and I have started to... we've become part of the churn. We are no longer subscribing to multiple streaming services at once because they are now basically cable. So, you know, we do like one at a time. So I'm like blasting through...
Not basic cable, but basically cable.
Yeah. I'm blasting through movies, and I've been watching some really, really great stuff lately. And... some stuff that I missed in my monthly recommendations that turned out to be maybe some of my favorite shit of the year. So I'm excited to visit that in a few months. And also some bummers. I finally got around to watching The Exorcist Belieber. And, you know, when a movie gets that panned, I'm always like, oh, is this just a pile-on? And I'm sad to say no. It, what the fuck happened?
Well, I don't care to share exactly what I've been watching because it's just I have a variety of interests.
Oh.
Ew.
Adult content?
No. I mean, I
that
guess
explains all those charges at the
not adults
at
only
the hotel.
Anyway, I've been watching a lot of things, and yes, to Richard's point, we do stream and then we stop. And then we stream again.
We pinched the stream off mid-flow, which does kind of hurt a little bit. But then...
after we've completed one full streaming cycle...
Yes.
Then we stop.
Well, we hydrate.
And then we stream somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly.
For a little while.
No, we're not spraying
we're like dogs,
our viewing everywhere. We are very targeted in where we...
sprinkle our
How
streaming.
far can we take this incredibly juvenile double entendre?
Yeah, we sprinkle our streaming across... platforms.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. This has been Terror in Tandem.
This has been How Healthy Is Your Urethra?
Oh God, so it's like just I could pass a Cadillac through that thing.
Ew, that's not good.
So, what are we talking about today that isn't related to our hideous aging bodies?
Nothing. We're talking about Edgar Allan Poe.
Ah, yes. The normal guy who was normal, lived a normal life and did normal things.
Didn't do drugs, didn't have any problems.
Did not
have
marry
any
his cousin.
fears at all.
Yeah.
No, this is part 3 of our deep dive into Edgar Allan Poe, where we're going to unpack another quatrain of stories
of classic spine-tingling tales of terror, and I hope that you haven't had Poe enough of it yet, because we got more.
Wow.
I have been waiting 3 episodes to pull that one out.
Wow.
No, I just came up with it. That's how witty I am.
Yeah.
Ha!
Witty or shitty. You decide.
Speaking of which, so
let's jump in.
I would love to. Now, I sort of structured this chronologically speaking in terms of publication. So if we go by that way, which I've just decided we are, we're going to start with The Fall of the House of Usher.
Great.
1839 publication date, so a bit ago. We're talking yesteryear, if you will. And this is... I think this is my second favorite Poe story.
Interesting.
Of all time. And to be quite honest with you, I'm not sure how much of that is influenced by my deep, undying love for the Roger Corman film adaptation with Vincent Price as Roderick Usher.
I mean, we're going to get into that in our adaptations.
We are.
But Vincent Price was definitely the Poe darling.
For sure. And
the Podunk darling.
The thing is, I have seen that movie so many times. It is one of my favorites. It's such a comforting classic to me that it's now become inextricably woven into the prose of Fall of the House of Usher. So when I'm watching it, I'm seeing those, Roger Corman Gothic sets and the fog, and I see Vincent Price. So I'm no longer sure if I love the story solely on its own merits or if it's just sort of become married to the movie version as well, and I love it all together. But either way, I like things, and that's fine.
Well, I think that this is one of the easiest to digest in the sense of it really does have a mental breakdown, very prevalent. It has a haunted house.
Yeah. Very
clearly. A lot of the themes in this story are really fully communicated.
Oh, yeah.
There's not a lot.
It's not subtle.
No.
The imagery and the metaphors here are not vague.
Yes.
The house crumbles as the, family itself crumbles.
The two remaining ushers.
Yes, exactly. And let's get into it.
Yeah.
This is also so Poe, like a lot of horror authors, in my opinion, sometimes struggle to land the ending. Some of his endings, but
this one
is
great.
C'est magnifique.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Well, just a brief summary of the story is a unnamed narrator is in a carriage on his way to his old childhood friend's house, Roderick Usher.
Yes.
And
brother of his beloved Madeline.
Yes. He arrives and finds his friend. I'm going to talk about a little duality in this.
He finds his friend a fucking mess.
But not. I mean, it's sort of, he finds him to be upbeat and, engaging, but then he also finds him to be sullen and withdrawn.
Yeah.
He vacillates between the two.
And that's the scariest, that's the worst part because, on the one hand, the more obvious stuff about Roderick, the state he's in, he describes himself as being like hypersensitive to all sensations. So cloth on his skin feels like knives, and, the slightest sounds are like, explosions in his ears. And Vincent Price does that monologue so well with his very expressive face. But in the beginning of the story, that's foreshadowed really beautifully. Poe would like to start his stories with, a couplet or a quatrain or a line or two in another language. I think it just made him feel, fancy. And this is no exception. It begins in French with a line from the work of Pierre-Jean de Béranger, and it translates to, "His heart is a lute strung tight. As soon as one touches it, it resounds." That is perfect because Roderick is somebody whose senses are so attuned that even just mundane activity is torture for him.
So when the narrator finally gets to the house and he finds Roderick, he's sort of this strange version of his childhood friend.
He's nothing like we've been led to believe he's going to be.
To be suffering from some kind of very strange disease that isn't really clear, but it seems to have taken hold of Madeline in a physical form and taken hold of Roderick in a mental form.
Madeline is like wasting away.
And
she's becoming tired and
appearing like a ghost.
Yeah, it's
walking
like her
and not acknowledging the
like
narrator.
her life energy is being bled from her, and she dies kind of
Quote,
nothing. Well, yeah,
she
exactly.
dies.
Yeah,
withering away to nothing.
She falls into what we later find is a heavy catatonia.
Yes. So what happens then is Roderick and the narrator bury her.
As you do.
And they start to, Roderick's sort of, compulsion for his mind becoming unstable, and then the narrator starts to hear things, and he doesn't know if he's caught the disease or if what is happening is real or imagined, but it's really Madeline trying to get out of her buried alive
the
situation.
Sounds that is so one of the most haunting moments in any Poe tale is when they finally pry open, when they get the coffin. They find the coffin, it's open, and on the inside are like bloody scratch marks from a now completely insane, blood-crazed Madeline who has lost all sanity, waking up in a coffin that, by the way, Roderick Usher nailed shut.
Yeah. Like he almost knew.
Nailed it shut.
Maybe they did that back then. I don't know.
Well, that is some of the interpretation. Now, there is some case to be made that nailing the coffin shut could be a common practice amongst especially the wealthy due to heavy prevalence of grave robbing. However, once you find out that Madeline wasn't quite dead, it definitely takes a new meaning. And the imagery of mourning at a casket, and then there's also the questionable rapidity, like how quickly Roderick is like, yeah, get that bitch in the coffin and nail it shut.
Yeah, we got to get rid of her. I mean, when she shows back up at the house covered in blood in her burial
never a good
clothes,
sign. Never good.
She essentially collapses onto Roderick and kills him.
Oh, yes.
And kills herself. And then the house, which is the final moments of the story, as the narrator is trying to, escape.
Yeah.
Is crumbling. So the tethering of the actual physical Usher house and everything it stood for, and the family itself, the two that were remaining, Roderick and Madeline, they all crumbled together.
Now, that is such a fascinating detail about this story. You mentioned the duality of Roderick in the beginning, is that at every turn, Poe is kind of leading you to believe that there might be something supernatural going on, only to then at the end show a completely rational experience for explanation of what's going on. However, then the house crumbles, and you're like, wait, it was supernatural after all. So there is something. It's never
let's
quite
unpack that
defined.
a little bit. So, when the narrator shows up, the first thing he really notices is the house with eye-like windows. So there's a personification of this house throughout the story that it is an usher. Like
a sick person, though, because the land around it is suffering.
Well, the eyes are vacant.
Yeah.
And then he sees the eyes are like Roderick's eyes are luminous until Madeline dies, and then that causes his eyes to go vacant.
Yeah.
And then the house itself is vacant.
It's the slow deterioration of like a once grand aristocratic family that is now basically nothing, and Poe is literally showing the death of the family.
The death of the family means the death of the physical structure that it's the house of Usher. So if you think about fashion houses, okay, that exist because of a specific designer and the products.
You mean like House of the Gucci?
Yeah. So
we got it a Gucci.
In products they design.
Great movie,
The house
everyone.
of Usher is so intertwined with the living beings inside that once those become, dead, the house must crumble as well. And it is a supernatural
absolutely
connection.
And the other side of this, and this is, ladies and gents, aside from how creepy and scary Poe can be and how unnerving his stories can be, my other favorite part of him is how much he viscerally fucking hated the rich.
Yeah.
Because this is two genetically streamlined, effete aristocrats withering away in their crumbling mansion. Isolated. Basically like two useless fucks not doing anything in life, just slowly dying and going, oh no, we're slowly dying, but not, doing anything about it. Just That's the way it goes. And then everything crumbles around them.
What's interesting is that this house is clearly decaying, but it's still standing when the narrator gets there. And also, it's so elaborately decorated inside.
Oh, yeah.
But
it's got everything you could need.
Dusted over
except
and not well kept.
A life.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
Right.
So the only way this house can stand is through this death. Now, why do we have this narrator who doesn't really do much? You know, we don't know much about his background. He does help Roderick bury Madeline.
He's us, the narrator.
He's the witness.
He's us. He's the regular person being like, what the fuck is happening in this place?
He's the actual witness of the fall.
Exactly. Yeah. And, you know, it's really reminiscent of, you see it every once in a while, well, a lot actually, a seemingly perfect facade of a wealthy family, and then you get in there and it's a disgusting nightmare of a mess. And that's what the narrator is. It's the average person going, oh, I'm going to go visit my fancy friends in their fun mansion. But when he's in there seeing, oh, it's actually incredibly depressing and dysfunctional in here.
And then it also starts to take over his mind.
Oh, yeah. That's the toxic association of being near people like that is you feel it too.
Yeah. So I just want to explore, as I mentioned, the duality, you know, the being sullen versus being lively, sanity versus insanity, real or imagined.
Poe did like to play with the line between those things.
Yeah. The physical and the dynastic ushers falling apart. I mean, that actually happened in front of the narrator's eyes, but, you know, it happened also prior to that. Oh,
you know, it was a slow death until it wasn't. And then it was a very quick, bombastic death.
And Madeline and Roderick, there seems to be a little doppelganger.
There's also here. A little bit like, you guys are brother and sister, right?
So intertwined, like twins.
Yeah, it's like,
they're not twins.
Hey, you're related.
But then the house with
the
surviving ushers, you know.
It's a little flowers in the attic. Yeah. A little bit. Like, that's never explicitly stated, but they're the kind of, like, siblings that have an extremely close relationship.
Yes. And also, because I think there was a little bit of an unreliable narrator in the sense that he's telling you what he sees, but he doesn't know if all he's seeing
he's
is
telling
real.
you what he comprehends.
Yes.
Because some of this shit is blown his mind. And by the end of it, he's like half crazed and insane himself.
Exactly. Like, he doesn't walk away from this a happy man.
No. He watches his buddy, his betrothed, and all this weird stuff.
His childhood friend.
Yeah, but he's definitely into Madeline.
I want to talk a little bit about the Tempest.
You
know, I felt like this was very much like the storms of
Shakespeare. Yeah.
Especially King Lear with the storm and the madness.
Yeah.
Because once that storm happens, that's when Madeline really starts to permeate everybody's mind.
Imagine, you know, old-timey days. What's more, like, maddening, terrifying than the cacophony of, you know, a storm banging on the shutters.
It's all foreshadowed, too, because on his ascent or approach to the house, he's talking about how dark and gloomy, and then the weather starts to turn, and you know,
like we said, it's not a subtle tale.
No, it's all there. If you want an exercise in literary devices like foreshadowing and duality and you know, personification.
Okay,
those are all very obvious.
You know, I think this was some of the criticism Poe got from his contemporaries, like William Butler Yeats pretty famously looked down on Poe for what he saw as simplicity in his writing.
Yeah.
Like, you know, he's not doing anything. But I think there's an argument to be made for somebody perfecting a certain sort of trope or formula. Because, the fall of the House of Usher, there's nothing about it that is particularly challenging to the reader. It's all laid out for you, but it's done so in such a masterful way that it never feels like an exposition dump. There's never a break in pacing. It's an exciting, well-written tale that maybe doesn't, I don't know, it's not very experimental, but it's goddamn rip-roaring, you know?
It is.
It's in that the constraints of that sort of story, it is the best it could possibly be.
Yeah, I mean, not everything has to be about broken hearts and, plague.
Yeah, don't
as
hold your writing to
represented
the
by-
standard of Yeats. That's a pretty fucking high bar.
Yeah.
Well, that's The Fall of the House of Usher.
Yeah.
What's next on the old chronology list of chronological chronologers? It is 1842, ladies and gentlemen. We're taking you into a pit with a pendulum.
Wow.
We're talking about the pit and the pendulum. Now, getting back to Poe's love of having, fancy foreign things, non-English, whatever. Latin. He loved Latin. So at the beginning of this one, there's a Latin quatrain that was actually real. Now, this was written above a meeting place of the Jacobins. The Jacobins were
anybody that's watched or read Outlander knows who the Jacobins are.
Cool. Anybody who has listened to me talk for more than 3 minutes has probably called me a Jacobin at some point. But they were a group of French revolutionaries who... Well, they had great intentions, and then they guillotined like 30,000 people, and then all got guillotined themselves about a year later. So the Jacobins weren't too popular after their, what was it called? Yes, Reign of Terror. Mm-hmm. I think if that's the way history is stamping your movement, you should rethink things. So the quatrain reads, "Here an unholy mob of torturers with an insatiable thirst for innocent blood once fed their long frenzy. Now our homeland is safe, the funereal cave destroyed, and life and health appear where dreadful death once was." Now, this was written over a meeting house for Jacobins after they were all rounded up and themselves guillotined. French Revolution was wild, man. The parties were intense. So that begins...
Yeah,
the pit and the pendulum.
Let's give a little overview about this story. It's essentially...
it's all there in the title, folks.
The main character, an unnamed prisoner, condemned to death by the Spanish Inquisition. While we don't know what his crimes were, he awakens to find himself in a chamber.
He might have mentioned that, the earth was round.
Yeah, maybe. And it's completely dark, and he thinks he's been buried alive, but he discovers it's not a tomb, and he starts to grope around the dungeon to try to get his bearings.
Yeah, distances, where is he?
As he's groping around, he nearly falls into this terrible rat-infested pit.
Well, it's bottomless.
Yes.
He drops a stone in there, and it takes forever.
Game of Thrones. That pit that goes into the sea, essentially. But
honestly, there were a lot of pits in that show.
Yeah.
Any cavernous abyssal maw.
But so then he sort of loses consciousness, wakes again, and discovers that he's now been tied down, and he perceives a razor-edge pendulum swinging back and forth above his body, slowly coming towards his chest.
Yes.
And right before he's cut in half, rats chew through the ropes. And then just when he thinks that he's escaped this piece, the walls start to become hot, the room starts to shrink, and there's nowhere to go except this fiery pit of iron. And then he hears the sounds of the French army to rescue him.
Yes.
So,
a couple of things.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about some of the...
Let's focus on the good stuff
sensory.
First. Because this is a... Now, I went into, rereading this. It's been a long time. And I think most of us just remember the big things. The pit, the pendulum. And the sense of pants-shitting terror that Poe instills, because this man can't see anything. And the pendulum, it's never quite been adapted properly because it takes days to drop down. This thing moves by almost imperceptible levels, and then after a while he just notices, oh my God, is it lower? I think it might be lower. And he questions himself, and the way it's written, he's going crazy.
It's
and
totally dark, too.
Yeah, you hear the whooshing. You hear that sort of metallic slicing through the air.
You hear the gnawing,
and he
rats.
knows he can sense that there are inquisitors above him viewing this because, of course, they were a bunch of sadistic pervs. Now, the rats are all over, and that's very cool
because of the flesh.
Now, here's the thing:
fleshing issues.
There are two moments in this story where it becomes absurd. First off, skipping over one part, when he does escape from his bonds, the torturers pull up the pendulum, and the pendulum is already cutting him by this time. It is slicing into his skin, but it drops so slowly that it's just cutting like the top layers, which is horrifying. But he manages to free himself and get loose. So the very crafty inquisitors adapt. They pull up the pendulum and turn the room into a squish box. The walls start pressing in, and it's going to shove him into the pit when there's a deus ex machina. So, ridiculous part number one. How he frees himself. Because what he does is he bleeds onto the leather straps that are holding his wrists, and then the rats go and they eat the straps and free him. So...
yeah.
What?
I know.
What? Why didn't they just eat him? He's bleeding and alive.
And is this like... I mean, because this is all, again, in darkness, and the perception of this person who's probably been deprived of any liquids or food for however long.
Yeah.
I mean, is this...
Why did the rats eat just the leather straps that were holding him down and not, him?
Is this wishful thinking? Is he still imprisoned?
I didn't think of it that way, but we'll get to that. We'll talk about that at the end. A little occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge type shit. So there was a couple of lines too. Right at the beginning, this really stopped me. I quickly unclosed my eyes.
Yeah.
You mean you opened your eyes?
I know.
Is that what did you mean to say?
It's sort of like when you write a term paper and you
need like a higher word count.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were weird moments. But like you said, I mean, this guy is going crazy. He's feverish and starved and tortured and dehydrated. And maybe unclosing my eyes is the best way you can describe it. But,
and he keeps blacking out and coming to. And so is he coming to? Is this a dream state? Is this a nightmare, I should say? I mean, he describes smell. He describes how things feel. We are really right there with him, whether it is dreamed nightmares or partial reality. He could be tied down the whole time. There might not be a pendulum.
He does come in and out of consciousness. I just picked out a line that was kind of weird, but there are some real corkers in this. He describes the sadism of the Inquisitors as monkish ingenuity and torture. That's amazing. Also, as a Catholic school survivor, I agree. He talks about the direst physical agonies, death by the most hideous moral horrors. I mean, that's next level. I do enjoy that. That almost makes up for unclosing one's eyes.
Yeah. I mean, I really think that there is an argument to be made for these. A lot of this is hallucinatory.
Well, I am really interested.
I don't know
that you
enough
just said
about
that.
the Spanish Inquisition and the prisoners that were.
Let me help you with that.
Whether they had a physical pit and a big pendulum that just like rats all of a sudden.
Couple of things.
Chawed at the leather.
There is zero physical evidence that any device like this ever existed.
Right.
There is apparently one mention of it.
It seems more sophisticated for like when was the Spanish Inquisition? The 13th.
I believe the 15th century. So there is apparently one mention of it in one text, a secondhand account given by someone who apparently said they saw it. And that's like, my mother's brother's cousin's friend told me this one time, 800 years ago. So whatever, it probably didn't happen, but it's still pretty dope. And who cares? Poe invents lots of cool shit. The thing that I didn't really like as much is the literal last paragraph. It is the last paragraph, comes out of nowhere, and then the French army, led by General LaSalle, stormed into Toledo and saved the day. And it's like, what? I hate a Deus Ex Machina, especially one in the 1800s. I mean, it's not ancient Greece. What the fuck? So that sucks. But also, General LaSalle was a general in Napoleon Bonaparte's army, which was several hundred years after the Spanish Inquisition.
Right. Maybe he was imprisoned for not several hundred
Well,
years,
but who the fuck knows? I think
maybe it was the publisher of the story that was like, you can't end it.
That could be it.
Because the French are going to be mad at us.
Yeah, or it's too devastating. But it also could be that Poe wrote most of the story while he was packing up his opium bowl, smoked it midway through, and then by the end, it really kicked in, and he said, oh, the fucking French army came in, and bing, bing, boom, ba, boop, 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 boop. Everybody wins. Yay. Opium.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
So who knows? If you just cut out the last paragraph, though, and treat the rat part like it's a scene from the Fast and Furious, it's actually pretty great. The description of just the madness coming from the, not the torture itself, but the promise of torture is brilliant.
Yeah.
Is absolutely brilliant. It is nerve-wracking. You feel the claustrophobia.
Yes.
And when you really sit and think for a moment what it would take to do this to a person, and why would you do this to a person?
And is it
it's truly horrifying.
of this, is it self-torture? Is
Yeah.
his mind making up all of these scenarios because he keeps narrowly escaping honestly,
in sort of a heroic
in this
movie
huge
kind
pit,
of,
and then all of a sudden he's strapped down,
and you just hear like a band in the background being like dun, 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 dun. It's your theory about that it's a sort of Sixth Sense occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, he's dead the whole time or he's crazy, that redeems it a little bit in my eyes, because I
definitely interpreted it that way, because
I had forgotten about the end, and I reread this a few days ago, and I was like, oh, what the hell?
And then he woke up.
Yeah, exactly. My God, what was that show? St. Elsewhere, St. Elsewhere, where it was at the end of the show, it was all the dreams of an autistic kid looking at a snow globe. Thanks, Denzel, for your time. Yeah. That's a fucking way to end a show.
Wow.
Anyway,
let's take a break.
The pendulum. Let's take a break. Why am I strapped to this slab? Tired of watching mom blow through your inheritance on medicine? Or have you just had it up to here with caring for the vulnerable with compassion? Well, whatever the reason, you don't need the millstone around your neck that is loved ones. But you know what else you don't need? A first-degree murder charge. And that's where Visiting Demons comes in. At Visiting Demons, our swarm of infernally trained hospice monsters will make sure the ailing breadwinner in your family meets an untimely but difficult to investigate end. Oopsie, forgot to check the chart before we gave Gam her medication. Ruh-roh, looks like Uncle Moneybags fell out of the bed and out of the locked window across the room. You'll be laughing all the way to the reading of the will, secure in the knowledge that none of this will be traced back to you, because all visiting demons return to the specific plane of hell from which they were summoned upon a job well done. Sure, it causes them torment the human mind can't comprehend, but I think we've already established you don't care about things like that, am I right? Visiting Demons. Because who has time to wait for natural causes when you've got student loans to pay off? This is a fake ad for a fake product on a horror-themed podcast. We do not condone nor endorse hiring demons to murder people for money. Just let time take care of it.
And we're back.
Yes. Luckily, some rats tore through my bonds and I escaped the pit.
Let's hop on to the next
Vive la
story.
France! Our next story, chronologically speaking, would be absolutely something that I have looked up beforehand.
Can you just wait and stop talking until you figure it out?
Listen, folks, we got a box, and that box is oblong.
Oh.
We're talking 1844's The Oblong Box. One of Poe's funnier stories, in my opinion. I thought this was hilarious. It cracked me up. So, we are once again entering one of my absolute favorite Poe territories, which is I'm in a bad mood and I hate rich people. He, maybe in this story more than anywhere else, really takes them to task. Starting off right away with our narrator, who is...
Should I give a little summary?
I would
like
love
I
for you to
been?
do that. Yes, summarize in a little manner.
So the story takes place on a ship which is out to sea, and there is a suspenseful through line as to this oblong box and what its contents are. And basically the narrative revolves around this box and the obsession with finding out what's in the box. And Mr. Wyatt is with a traveling party. He's an artist. He has a new wife and 2 sisters.
Yes, the new Mrs. Wyatt.
Yes. And basically, this box exists like an elephant in a room. And it is like this obsession for our narrator. I don't
mean to bring up the oblong box in the room here, but
I don't think we have a name for the narrator.
We don't.
But he's basically like, I need to find out what's in this box.
Yes.
A storm comes.
Another tempest.
They get thrown out to sea, and Mr. Wyatt must go and retrieve the box, which he does.
He does.
But at the detriment of his own life.
Well, he lashes himself to the box and jumps overboard into the middle of a storm.
Yeah.
And that's the last anyone sees of Mr. Wyatt and his big old box.
Yeah. So what's in the box?
What's in the box? John Doe has the upper hand. So yeah, let me get back to this. This is such a lampooning of a very particular foil to Poe's artistic sensibilities, and that is the know-nothing poser with lots of money and time on their hands. So this narrator is an insufferable dick. From the very beginning, he's complaining about, the dirty, grubby captain told me I'm going to have to wait in my fancy hotel an extra day. And, the Wyatts aren't following the proper etiquettes. Poor Mrs. Wyatt. Now, I get that there's a twist there, but when they're on the boat, he's obsessed over this box, and Mrs. Wyatt, goes out amongst this group of mean girls and does her best to be friendly. And the way he describes her in all caps is chatty. But the way
she's overdoing it.
The way she is, but the way he describes her, it makes her seem like a perfectly fine, nice person. But he describes her like, and she was so vulgar, and she was uneducated, and she talked and talked. And you just picture this room of miserable, like opium-addled drunkards with money being mean to a lower class person who's like, hey, everybody, I'm just really happy to be here. What's your name?
Those are all clues to who this person's identity really is.
That's true, but
no noble woman of such high class would ever speak like that or as much.
And as the narrator himself puts it, she is decidedly vulgar.
Yeah.
The way Poe does it, though, is it's straight. He's not, outwardly ribbing. It's just the way he is describing this type of person. It just really feels like a wink.
Also, Mr. Wyatt is acting really suspect.
Now, back to the story.
He acts like he's going crazy. He constantly laughs maniacally whenever anybody asks what's in the box.
Let's talk about that for a second. So the unnamed narrator says, first off, the unnamed narrator looks at a human-sized oblong
it looks like
box.
A coffin.
What? That's what you would call a roughly 6-foot-long oblong box shaped like it could perfectly contain a dead body?
Yeah.
Well, that's not what the narrator thinks, because he looks at the oblong box and says, well, obviously he's hiding a copy of Da Vinci's Last Supper as painted by Rubini.
Right.
Which, listen, folks, whenever I look at a coffin, I'm like, okay, there's either a body in there or a copy of Da Vinci's Last Supper as painted by Rubini.
You and Nicolas Cage.
No, you open it up and there's just a note. It's like, got here first. So, yeah, Robini the Younger, excuse me. It's Robini the Younger, everyone. Well, it must be he's acquired a wonderful lithograph of Robini the Younger, and he's jealous. He's like, why isn't he telling me about this? And he wants to open the box, and he wants to find out, so he asks his friend, hey,
what's in the box?
what you got in that box? And old Mr. Wyatt does the very normal thing of laughing hysterically for 10 minutes before passing out. Now, just sit with that for a second. Imagine someone laughing hysterically in your face for 10 seconds and how fucking long that is.
I mean, 20 seconds is when it starts to get crazy.
What would you even... So what? My question is, what were these people doing for 9.5 minutes?
Let's test our audience. Well, why don't you set a timer?
Yeah,
and
10
I'm going to
minutes,
laugh
excuse me.
hysterically for...
But, like, what were they doing for 9 minutes and 40 seconds while this fucking guy is laughing? Did they sit down? Did he, like, open a paper and be like, okay, well...
Slowly backing away.
My God. And then he passes out because, he had just cackled for 10 minutes straight. Obviously, you're going to pass out. And they wake him up and he's like, it happens.
Let's talk about what's in the box, though.
Yes.
It's his wife.
It's the real Mrs. Wyatt. Yeah.
He basically finds this, I don't know, is she like a maid or a
well,
local...
so he gets married to this woman while they're traveling, and she croaks. And he's got to take the body back to bury her, but he realizes...
Nobody wants to have a body
Nobody's
on the boat.
want to try. It's bad luck. You're not going to want to travel with a dead person. So he says, "It's don't worry about it. It's like stuff." And he grabs the nearest serving girl and says, "Hey, bitch, you're my wife now. Go talk to these rich, mean people, or I'll fucking kill you." And this poor woman is like, "Hi, I'm a rich, fancy lady," and everybody's like,
look at me.
You are
I'm rich.
decidedly
I'm
vulgar."
Fancy. I'm rich and fancy.
I feel so bad for this poor servant who, like, definitely did not have a choice.
Oh, she's dead now.
Yeah.
She needs a box.
And then at the end, he goes bananas and ties himself to the box during a storm where the ship is going down. Everybody's getting into lifeboats, and there's a pretty cool image of him, like, jumping over the side tied to this box. But, yeah.
And they both sink.
The thing is
forever.
At the end of it, there's nothing supernatural. There's nothing apparent, even, like, really scary. And
pretty much everybody's dead.
When Roger Corman...
I think the narrator and the captain and a couple of crew.
When Roger Corman adapted this with Vincent Price and Christopher Lee, he done added a fucking lot of story because there's basically no story here.
I mean, it's the tension all about what's in the box. I think,
but there isn't really any of that, in my opinion.
I think at one point, I wish they would have gone a little bit further. Is like Mr. Wyatt's in his cabin alone, and he opens the box so he can reconnect with his wife.
That would have been
cool.
What
does that mean?
If they went like a Rose for Emily with it, like he opens the box and sleeps in it at night,
or yeah.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Reconnects with his wife.
Understood, as man does woman. So, there's some great Poe stuff in here. Like I said, the imagery, the dead wife, the going insane. It's all classic Poe, but there's nothing really happens, and it's not scary. So I was focused so much on the characterization of this awful group of posers.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious. The way he describes these, like, ennui and suffering, but
it also pushes that bad luck omen, which is he didn't tell anybody that there was a dead body on the box.
Yeah,
in the box,
which is a dick move.
And the omen is bad that something's gonna happen at sea, which it does. So I didn't reveal this because of the bad luck, but the bad luck happens anyway because the body is on the ship.
Yes, and a quick note to all of you out there who might look at cruise ships as something other than a floating sewage factory dropping hordes of basic bitches off at lovely tourist destinations to ruin them. Yeah, every cruise ship has a morgue. It has body storage on it because on basically every cruise, someone dies and they gotta fridge the body for a while because it's hot out there and you're at sea, you can't get anywhere for a week. So just, while you're partying with your Disney princess or your like failed 90s stand-up comedian, just know that a couple decks below you is Popsicle Grampy.
Can we reframe that?
No, that's all staying in. That's going on our platinum vinyl record sales release. Dead cruising.
I guess they didn't keep it over 55 miles an hour.
Every cruise ship has oblong boxes, and I just want to tell you, not all of them have copies of Da Vinci's The Last Supper as painted by Rubini the Younger.
But some might.
Some might, though. Some actually might legitimately. If you open them up and it does have that, it's possible. So that is the oblong box, a curious entry.
A mystery, if you will.
We're going to end our quartet with one of my low-key favorite Poe stories. It's not necessarily one of his more well-known ones, but it is bad fucking ass, and it fits into one of his favorite little subcategories, the Poe revenge tale.
Yeah.
Like my absolute number one favorite story, The Cask of Amontillado, it's the tale of someone getting their revenge and getting away with it.
And having fun while doing it.
Oh, yes. Poe... that's the thing that separates Poe's revenge tale. A lot of revenge tales show you, the cost of enacting revenge, what it does to a person, how revenge is empty, you don't get it. Not for Poe. For Poe, revenge is fantastic. The person it's always ironic, well planned out. The person has a great time while they're doing it, and they get away with scot-free at the end. Poe's revenge is just the ultimate fantasy seen to completion, and Hop Frog is one of the best. We are talking, now let's for the younger listeners out there, we're speeding this all the way up to 1849.
Yeah.
Yeah, remember that, kids?
Let me tell you a little bit about what this is. It's really, the story, the plot of it.
Hop along, Frog.
Hop Frog and Trippetta have dwarfism. They're taken from their home countries, and
which is mean.
Presented to the court. And the king ultimately forces Hop Frog to be the court jester and Trippetta to be his, plaything, I guess is the best way to say it.
Just imagine a disgusting hedonistic monarch and what they would do with jesters with dwarfism, and that's it. That's the thing.
So Hop Frog endures constant humiliation and abuse from the king and his ministers.
Yeah, his group of awful men.
And after a particularly poor treatment of Trippetta, he decides to convince the king to, at a masquerade, dress up in these hilarious costumes. Which
so fun.
Yeah, which is essentially like tight fabric with covered in tar and plastering flax
and made to look like orangutans. Poe's favorite primate.
Yeah,
he loves an orangutan
because that comes up again in Murders in the Rue Morgue.
It sure does. And I've always thought orangutans were like the sweeter, gentler primate of that animal kingdom, and not to Poe. They are like orange death machines in Poe's eyes.
Yeah. But it's very disturbing. He also says, what would be great is if we chain you all together like you're this group that can't move independently of one another.
Hold on. Let's back up a second. Because their treatment of Hop Frog is sadistic. I mean, Hop Frog is horribly allergic to alcohol, and they make him binge drink, or they're going to murder Trippetta in front of him. So, he's had it. And the way Hop Frog, now he's a jester, so he has a bit of leeway in the way he can communicate with the aristocracy. And he uses that to make these suggestions and get people to go along wholeheartedly with them. So he's not just saying, hey, put on these suits. He's saying, what would get everyone crazy at this party? Mm-hmm. Is if you all dressed up like wild beasts.
They won't know it's you.
They won't know it's you. You cavort around and you can grab titties and butts galore in all their buxom French outfits, and you can be drunken wild beasts in these extremely flammable outfits I'm crafting for you.
And I'll keep you all chained up.
And won't that be fun? Won't that be outrageous? What will the people? They'll be so shocked.
I'm gonna hook that chain to the apparatus that holds up the chandelier, so that when the men are pulled upwards, they're hanging from the ceiling,
chained together,
all chained together. And he doesn't tell them this part, but I'm going to light you on fire.
Oh, yeah, I'm definitely going to light you motherfuckers on fire.
And tar.
Oh, is that flammable?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Time. And they're covered in it. So Hop Frog has had enough of your
Very
shit.
Gruesome. Very
he has
gruesome.
had enough. And you know what? he is the fucking working man hero we all deserve.
I mean,
so,
this is the ultimate slave revolt.
It is. It absolutely is, because he is literally a slave. But
Taken from his country. I mean, I think this is all what Poe has implied here.
Yes.
Is this is an uprising.
Oh, Poe was an abolitionist.
Yeah.
He
the
famously
tar and feathering.
hated.
It's like an inversion of that.
He hated, the prejudices of the rich class, the upper class, that he saw as, deliberately keeping people oppressed for their own needs. And, he wasn't wrong, and
Especially
still isn't.
people of color being compared to primates.
So
also is like a subversion of that. Like he's really symbolizing this and hanging them.
And the thing is, when
them.
you're reading this, nothing's fucking changed. I mean, this is every Supreme Court justice that went to Harvard and, put on blackface for Halloween because it was edgy. Oh, look at everyone's going to be like so outraged and shocked because I'm a super edgy edgelord. This is Hop Frog being like, oh, yeah, everyone's going to be talking about this for years. You did the most shocking thing. And these drunken fools are like, oh, yes. And then everyone will come to our parties and talk about us.
But what Hop Frog is really doing is emboldening other kept people.
Oh, yeah.
To get the revenge. This is the biggest fear that the aristocracy has.
That the little guy...
No pun intended.
Well, every pun intended. This is, like we've said before about Poe, he loves metaphor, does not like subtlety.
Hop Frog is a dwarf, so is Trapetta, and
they're literally little
this
people.
King and his ministers
they're huge. Yeah, they're hulking, big, sweaty,
fat, loud.
They're hedonistic.
Boisterous.
Yeah, in a time of scarcity, they are gluttonous. Now. This, I think we mentioned this in a previous episode, but this was two things this paralleled. One pretty directly and one a little bit more personally. Like you said, it is a story of revolt, but it also closely parallels Poe's life, his own life, in that Hop Frog was taken as a young person to a different land, given a new name, and mistreated. Much like Poe was given to John Allan as a young man, given a new name, and mistreated. And, Poe always had this sort of put upon aggrieved nature, which is why he wrote so many revenge fantasies.
He only wishes he was allergic to alcohol.
Well, that too. But he, he's getting his frustrations out. But the other parallel is this actually happened. Although not to this extent.
I have.
Hit me with it.
Charles VI of France in 1393.
Who, for some context, began his reign as Charles the Beloved, ended his reign as Charles the Mad.
Yes.
So, yeah, something happened there.
So at a party that his wife threw, I believe, he was unaware that the outfits which he was dressed in, along with some other folks in his court,
they were dressed to look like wild men. Yeah, like dirty peasants.
He was unaware, but they were flammable.
Oh, so flammable.
A latecomer to the party, the king's own brother, came in with merriment and a torch and accidentally set fire to all of them.
Two things that don't go well together are merriment and open flames.
And since they were all chained together, except for the king,
Oops.
The king was not chained to them.
No.
So you have a wondering whether or not he actually knew they were flammable, because he did keep the flames far from the center.
And he survived in a very interesting way.
Well, two of these chained wild men died immediately.
From, I'm guessing, flames?
And two died days later.
Ooh,
because of the trauma from
crispy.
The flames.
If you're going to die in flames, it's best to do it immediately.
So what were you going to say about the king?
Yeah, so good old King Charles, being the manly man that he was, hid under his aunt's skirt. And now his aunt, I should mention, this being the aristocracy, was 15 years old at the time. Your auntie who's 15. It's not even a family tree. It's like a family vine bush. So he hid under her voluminous skirts, which, those fancy old French outfits. protected him from the fire. And Joan the second lived. She was Countess of Berry, and she lived a long time. She didn't die in those fires. So good on you, 15-year-old Joan. You saved the king and didn't really get a lot in return for that. But, you know.
And if you're like, oh, the king was probably just a boy himself. He wasn't.
No. Grown man. Totally gross, weird creep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was like 25, maybe.
Like, we mentioned the French Revolution and how, you know, everyone was getting guillotined and angry. That didn't happen out of nowhere. This is the kind of shit that led to that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, it's a pretty amazing story that, you know, you're reading Hop Frog and you're like, well, that's outrageous and it could never happen. Oh, it did. This almost exact thing happened, except Poe added the revenge element. And it really is every uprising, revolt, every, you know, person with a boot on their neck just having enough. And I swear to God, at every fucking union rally, there should be a statue of Hop Frog.
Yeah.
Our hero, Hop Frog. Our hero, Hop Frog. No, low center of gravity can't be toppled. So it's not necessarily, like I said, it's one of his revenge tales. So it does have a bit of tension, but I think the joy in reading a story like this is in the sort of grim, morbid satisfaction you get at watching a bunch of assholes get their just desserts. Because he does really write these people as like, when they start burning, you're like, oh God, thank goodness. They were the worst.
Yeah, right.
So Poe really does know how to do fan service. He sets you up to really just feel guilt-free about watching this horrible thing, because that's an element sometimes in horror.
I would say this is probably the most
It's one
grotesque.
of his more gruesome. Outside of like maybe Berenice, it's one of his more gruesome stories.
Yeah, I mean, it really is violent and dark
and Poe was in a mood when he wrote this
horrific,
one.
But maybe you don't feel so bad because of how badly these people treated Hop Frog.
Well, if you look at the modern parallels of, you know, billionaires burning the world to the crisp and building rockets to shoot themselves off this world they're destroying, and you're like, you know, Hop Frog, huh? Is he still taking bookings?
I mean,
is he available for parties?
I have more respect for these billionaires if they had some good dance moves, because so far.
Oh, you didn't like Bill Gates's 1993 having a fit on stage in front of people? I remember that. I also remember when he said the internet would lead to a 4-day work week.
Yeah, we're still waiting on that.
The same people are making promises about AI, which is how I just know it's going to work out well.
But in the meantime, why don't you
read
go
some
back
Poe.
to old 18 whatever and whatever?
Are you
and
feeling frustrated? Watch Poe write stories about all of your favorite villains getting burnt to a crisp or buried alive.
So that's Poe, deep dive.
I had an oblong time of this. I really
I'm going to
did.
put you in an oblong box.
I can't wait. Just poke air holes in it this time, please.
So we have some more of these coming up. And, they'll be coming out in the coming
days, weeks, months, and years. You know, we'll get to it. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thank you. Terror in Tandem is written, produced, and recorded by Laura and Richard Mathiasen, and edited and mixed by Richard Mathiasen. Our theme was written and performed by Carrie Denver, and all other music was written and performed by David Suspanic. All opinions expressed on this podcast are our own and should be taken as such. Thanks for listening, and please remember to give us a like, a review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time. We're static.